Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. We are starting one more live stream. And I wanna ask our audience if you can see me, if you can hear me. We are using a new streaming software. Not sure if it is working fine or not. Please let me know. All right, I'm getting here some yes, all good. And are you joining us from YouTube or Instagram? Because it looks like on Instagram it looks fine, but not on YouTube. All right, it looks like it's working on Instagram. Let me share with our folks on YouTube. All right, it looks like it's working for everyone. So let's proceed and start by discussing a few changes that we have seen in Brazilian immigration. And that's specific to the Brazil retirement visa or Brazil retirement track. And it looks like the Brazilian government is no longer, or at least some consulates, they are no longer accepting proof of a prior money transfer to Brazil as proof of your capability of sending funds to Brazil on an ongoing basis. Okay, that was a strategy we would use for clients in the past. Sometimes they go to a bank, like it could be Chase, it could be Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and if they ask for a letter that is not pre-approved by the bank, guess what? The bank is gonna many times resist in terms of sharing the letter. So our strategy, which was somewhat kind of well established by the Brazilian immigration, was to accept a prior wire transfer as a proof that you can send money to Brazil. But we've seen in the last couple of weeks at least two cases in which the prior transfer was not accepted. The consulate would say, you know what, like our list says, you need to present the letter from the bank, and that's what you need to present. We're not going to accept kind of secondary evidence, if you will. All right, let's take a look at the chat window. We have many of our friends here. We have James Rochas. Bom dia, amigo. Bom dia, boa tarde, James Rochas. Leon is confirming it's working fine. Shark, the bodyguard. Bom dia, yes. Nice to see you here, Shark. And we have Moses. I see it on my television, not phone. Good to have you over here, Moses. And we have a question. I have a question from James Rochas. After I register in the local cartório, what is the next step for União Estável? Application online at Polícia Federal website or Migrant Web. Can you please clarify? I need to do this soon. All right, so James, you're talking about the União Estável. For those of you who don't know what União Estável is like a civil union done at typically there are two routes. You could do at the cartório, which is the registry, or you could also do at the court level. Okay, most people, they are going to prefer the registry, the cartório, because it's more expedited and it's easier. Now, once you do the União Estável or civil union through the cartório, you're going to need additional evidence for your application, James, with the Polícia Federal. And typically, this route is not going to go through the Migrant Web. And again, for those of you who don't know, Migrant Web is a portal kept by the Brazilian government, by the Brazilian Immigration Department, in order for applications to be filed with the immigration. Now, the Migrante Web is not available to every single immigration route. It's actually available to just some of the routes. And União Estável, or even marriage for that matter, is not going to be handled through the Migrante Web. You're actually going to handle with Polícia Federal directly. And then the procedure, James, that you're going to handle with Polícia Federal is actually going to depend on the city and state in which you are. Okay, so if you are, for instance, in Rio de Janeiro, typically you not only can, but you must schedule an appointment in the future with Polícia Federal. If you're in the city of Rio de Janeiro, that would be done with the Polícia Federal in Santos Dumont, right, downtown area. They typically have an appointment available for the next month, and then you need to take all the compliant paperwork with you to this interview, okay? And for U.S. citizens, I'm not sure if that's your case, James, but just sharing because U.S. citizens are the majority of our clients, they would need an apostilled FBI background check, which is a major pain in the neck. Okay, we have many clients from the UK as well, and the UK is much easier for you to get like the background check plus an apostille. You can actually do that remotely. Unfortunately, for US citizens, when they are physically in Brazil, they are going to need to do like fingerprinting, send the cards to the FBI in the United States, so that goes physically. Once this is received, then they are going to issue the report. Once the report is issued, then you need to have the report apostilled by the Department of State in Washington, D.C. So it's a long journey, it's complicated, and it's costly. And if you are from the UK or another country in which the records are issued and apostilled without those hurdles, then you are lucky because you're not going to need to wait for the month and a half or even a couple of months that many times is the case for U.S. citizens. All right, James. So no application online typically. However, for some states and cities, it's not like exactly as an application. You're gonna need to first schedule your appointment, and for some federal polices, they are gonna ask the whole batch provided ahead of time, and that's typical, for instance, for Santa Catarina State, Florianópolis, Camboriú, and other cities. You're going to need to send the whole batch ahead of time for them to pre-vet your application package, right? Like they don't want to have people showing up with, insufficient documents and wasting like the booked appointment, okay? But it's going to depend on the specific Polícia Federal. James Rochas, I am in Ilhéus, Bahia, want to do this here. So apply in Polícia Federal site, an appointment here in the local police, or do I need to email someone? So I don't know, James, like I know Ilhéus, but last time I went to Ilhéus, it was probably 25 years ago, maybe 30. But it should be something like this, right? Like, I mean, ideally, James, this is a process you would do not by yourself, right? And you would have some support. It is typically recommended so you can get those things right at the first time. But if you want to do it by yourself, a visit to Polícia Federal could clarify if you're going to be able to schedule an appointment just right there, right? Like sometimes they may assist you with an appointment. They may have computers even available for people to schedule the appointments. And they can also tell you if you need to submit the paperwork ahead of time. All right, James. Shark, I'm coming in July with all my paperwork. I want to pursue the retirement visa. Should I apply immediately or wait for a 90-day extension approval first? how much is your fee for consultation? Shark, we have yes, we have consultations in which we can review your plans, discuss, your plans over a consultation. We have a consultation with our associate attorney, which is $75, if I'm not mistaken. And then we have a consultation with our senior attorneys, including myself, which is $125 US. All right. If you decide to secure our services down the line, this amount that you're paying for the consultation is going to be credited. On the retainer, so you're basically, getting the consultation for free when you hire our services. Very interesting to share, both in Brazil and in Portugal, Brazilian attorneys and Portuguese attorneys, they are not allowed to provide free consultations, right? And sometimes you're gonna see people offering free consultations, and that's against the law. And what I like to say is that, like the good attorneys and law firms that I know, none of them are gonna offer, like free consultations, because it's against the law, right? And if you're getting an attorney who's not following the law, not sure if that's a good start. So we try to do things by the books over here. And in addition to that, we try to share some knowledge through our live streams. Most of the questions we feel like we can, yes, answer. Some questions we may not be able to answer, so it doesn't become like a consultation, right? So we cannot get into too much detail here at the live stream, but listen, we are here to share the knowledge, and we appreciate you all coming here for the live stream. All right, Shark. But yes, let me see if I can share here the link to our consultation scheduling page, and that may make easier for you to schedule. All right, link was shared, Shark, and I'm sure you're very excited with your upcoming trip, right? You're coming to, is it Rio de Janeiro that you're coming, Shark? And let me know if you guys can still see me, and if it's still working good. All right, I just had to refresh here my chat window. Hopefully, our live stream remains good. Marisa Navas, very good to see you, Marisa, Ricardo. Boa tarde para vocês, desejando que vocês estejam tendo um dia muito frutífero, muito prazeroso, e obrigado pelo suporte. All right, Moses, after I register for my second language class at the University at Albany College, would you be able to help me use my trust fund to pay past the class if an office of your employment received money from me? Moses, it doesn't sound like something we can help, unfortunately, right? That's not something usually provided by law firms, but thank you for participating. Shark, coming to Rio. Yeah, Shark. I'm sure you're going to have a blast. It has been a while since I've been to Rio. Last time it's been like a couple of months, and I'm missing Rio already. Okay, Matt Gain is good to see you, Matt. They advertise that they can get the apostille in 10 business days. All right, Matt. Yes, there are two tracks, Matt, or maybe three, right? There are actually potentially several tracks for you to get the apostille, but it works more or less like this. Some providers, they can go and go in person and many times get an apostille handled on the same day. So you would take the document in the morning, and typically it becomes ready in the afternoon. If there is like a peak in demand, then they are going to say, you know what, like come back like in a week or so. Now, for most providers like us, Matt, is a matter of coordinating the logistics, right? So we have like a partner vendor in Washington, D.C., and then we have like a more like regular timeline in which, you know, like you need to mail the document to them. They are going to take the document and eventually, you know, take to the Department of State and get this thing and send it back. And all of those steps, they are going to take some time. And that could mean that it's going to be approximately 30 days for this thing to occur. And then they have a different level of service, which is going to be the expedited, in which documents are going to be sent, let's say, by FedEx second day, right? And in addition to sending and receiving by FedEx second day, this vendor would have like some cases as a priority. So kind of, you know, skipping the line, if you will, to be processed earlier. And that's how a 10 business day timeline would work. But yes, there are, you know, different tracks, and this would be more like an expedited type of thing, Matt. Thank you for chiming in. Shark, I want to schedule the 125. Absolutely, Shark. You're welcome to schedule the consultation. Matt, thank you for confirming that you guys can see us. Yes, we're changing our streaming software, and that's our first time using this new version. The nice thing about this new version is that it is capable of streaming not only to YouTube, but also to other platforms like Facebook and Instagram as well, right? So you have an option to pick different platforms to watch us live over here. Alexander, thank you for confirming. Alexander is also confirming that you guys can see us. I'm very excited seeing Rio. Yeah, Shark. Rio de Janeiro is absolutely unique, right? Just like everywhere else, there are some challenges to Rio de Janeiro, but the combination of, you know, a large city and the nature, like nature is pervasive, like throughout the city. At least in my case, I never saw anything similar throughout the globe. And I've been traveling, you know, around for a while. I've been to India, I've been to China, I've been to Ukraine, I've been, of course, to Europe, you know, North America, Canada, and listen, Rio's combination is unique. There is nothing out there like Rio de Janeiro, okay? I myself like a lot Ceará, Fortaleza, right? The northeast of the country. That would be actually my place of choice in Brazil. But I completely understand the people who would come to Rio. Sometimes they say, listen, I'm just setting up Rio as my arrival base. And from there, I'm going to visit other places. And many people, they will never leave Rio de Janeiro. They are going to stay in Rio de Janeiro for good. And they are going to be very happy. And we have many clients who started with the digital nomad and eventually upgraded to the real estate investor visa, or, you know, to the retirement when they qualify for the retirement, and they are living very happily in Rio de Janeiro and many other cities in Brazil. Alexander, I have a child with my Brazilian wife in the US, but we want to keep the option of moving to Rio de Janeiro open. So far, he has a Brazilian passport. Is there anything else that we should pursue to keep our options open? Alexander, I assume you have registered your U.S. marriage, right? I'm assuming here that you and your wife married in the United States. A major step for you to keep your options open is to register your marriage in Brazil. Okay, because when you register your marriage in Brazil, first thing, it is something that we Brazilians must do anyway. So it's not an option to register the marriage. Like if you are a Brazilian married or divorced abroad, you must register this marriage in Brazil. So that's something that your wife would have an obligation. But there is also an upside. So let's say if in the future you guys decide to spend a few years in Brazil, I don't know, like a sabbatical in Rio de Janeiro, if you have the marriage registered already, you are much closer to the permanent residency, okay? Because when you have the Brazilian marriage certificate, that's going to be actually the start point for your application for permanent residency based on marriage. And also very interesting to mention, in Brazil, like the technical term is actually not permanent residency. We say por prazo indeterminado or for an undetermined period of time. And that's a funny way of saying, of a more permanent nature. And the reason why the Brazilian government want to say this way instead of saying permanent is because if you lose the base for your residency, they are going to take this thing away. Okay, so the government concern over here is like, if they say it's permanent, how can they take this thing away? All right, so to avoid this kind of concern, even from a litigation perspective, the Brazilian government, I think it was around 2017, the Brazilian government stopped using the permanent residency term and instead has been using for prazo indeterminado or an undetermined period of time. All right, so this is something, Alexander, I would recommend. Yes, we actually have registered our marriage in Brazil. Thanks for this. We'll do so ASAP. Yes, register marriage in Brazil. Your child has a Brazilian passport, which is pretty good. Okay, so you guys are on track. And if you guys decided to have a sabbatical, I'm sure you're going to be on track. All right, let's see what else we have. Taking a look here at our backlog now. Let's see what else we have. Okay, this is a somewhat recurring topic, and we actually have some clients doing that. And the question goes more or less like this: listen, I wanna know if I can do it to buy a tract of land by the beach and then build a pousada, right? A pousada is like a type of, is not like a hotel, is like a more laid-back hotel or an inn. Maybe that could be a good translation for a pousada, but a pousada is a more rustic infrastructure by the beach in which you're going to do, short-term rentals, you're going to have guests, and you're going to be able, let's say, to enjoy life by the beach with a string of income. Okay, so I've seen this arrangement many times, and yes, it is something that is feasible. However, if you buy land, you don't qualify for the real estate investor visa. But there is a different track. There is the investment in a company scenario. And as long as you're doing this thing for real, I mean, it's not just like something fake for you to secure papers. And if you are indeed someone with good like business skills to run a business, that could be indeed a match, right? But just have the understanding that this is going to be something real and that you must keep for as long as you're going to use the residency in Brazil, meaning that if your business doesn't fly, if a few years down the line you're going to, I don't know, shut down the business or change the nature of your business, most likely you're going to lose your residency, okay? So just this heads up about, buying land and running a business, a pousada business on this land. But aside of the immigration perspective, it's a very interesting type of plan, right? Like, I mean, you buy land, you develop, you have like a few bungalows, you have one primary house for yourself, and then you can live by the beach, and then you can enjoy a string of income by doing short-term rentals. We have several of those cases here in our client base. And actually, such a coincidence. Like, I had a consultation today, but this gentleman, he was actually considering doing something like that, but not for the coast. He's actually in the countryside of the state of São Paulo, and that was his plan, right? But he was concerned about, like the intricacies of immigration slash, business. And that was the nature of the consultation today. All right, let me see what else we have. Okay, let me take a look again at our backlog. All right. World Cup. Okay, that one is. Yeah, if I think people are gonna go from Brazil to the World Cup event in the U.S., given the U.S. Immigration hurdles, I think so. I think like Brazilians, no matter what, like no matter if the United States is tightening the screws, I think Brazilians absolutely, in general, right? Like, I mean, you're always going to have like exceptions, but in general, Brazilians typically love the U.S. And U.S. culture is part of our culture. Like since since I was a child, I would naturally watch U.S. movies, and have as entertainment, like to see the way of life in the U.S. And, so yes, I think most Brazilians, they don't really care about, this whole immigration, debate like in the U.S., as long as, guess what, as long as they have a visa to enter the United States. Now, a concern I have about the World Cup is like, the price tag for the tickets, right? Like, it looks like it is something like outside of a prior event range. And I'm just curious, like if any of you who are watching our live stream as of now, if you're planning to attend any games in the World Cup, right? Like for us Brazilians, the World Cup is something major. And just to give you a perspective of how serious it is, was, like there is a kind of board like for labor law, and we have access to this labor law forum. Is a kind of, forum for attorneys. And then, attorneys were like sharing that there is an uptick ticket, like in terms of consultations of Brazilian employers. I'm not talking about foreign citizens, I'm talking about Brazilian employers, whether it is mandatory for the firm, to let the employee watch the Brazilian games. And whether or not it's mandatory, and there is nothing in our legislation making mandatory on the employer, but I can tell you, it would be something very culturally inappropriate for Brazilian employers to forbid Brazilian employees from watching the Brazilian games at the World Cup. Of course, like, employers are not going to let the people watch any random games, but for the games in which the Brazilian team is going to be playing, it is absolutely customary for companies, firms in Brazil, stores, like, it's like the country is going to stop, literally stops. It does not matter what time in the day. It could be in the morning, it could be in the afternoon, it could be, at any time. Brazilians are going to stop whatever they are doing, and they are going to watch like we say, the Brazilian a seleção brasileira, right? The Brazilian soccer team, and emphasis on seleção. Seleção means like those who were selected to represent Brazil in the World Cup. World Cup is something huge for Brazilians, right? So it is something really, really special for us. And you know what? Like at the firm, guess what? Like at the firm, everybody is gonna be, watching the Brazilian games, and depending on the time of the day, if it is like later in the day, we may allow our team members to leave earlier, or if it is like early in the day, they may arrive after the game, and that's again something absolutely customary in Brazil. Alexander is sharing, I cannot find any tickets to any games in New York City below $1,000, so I cannot go, unfortunately. Yes, Alexander, prices are just, I would say unfeasible, right? Like even for U.S. citizens living in the U.S., right? Like U.S. citizens like earn their salaries, or whatever gigs they have in U.S. dollars. But for Brazilians, there is an additional hurdle, right? Like which is the currency. So typically, $1,000, like it could be as much as a person would earn in a full month of work, right? So you would work the entire month to earn like $1,000, and then now you're going to spend this money to buy a ticket. So for Brazilians, that's even more challenging, and not including the trip to the U.S., which naturally peaks during the summertime. Not surprisingly, right? Like between June and August, that's when airfare is at peak level. So there is this hurdle on top of the cost of the tickets. But listen, Brazilians are always finding a way to enjoy the games, and something very typical that happens in the U.S., by the way, within the Brazilian communities in the United States, they are gonna schedule gatherings to watch the game together, right? So they're gonna have like a party. This party, guess what? Even though they are not in person at the stadium, they are gonna have a blast, because they are gonna have like big screens, they are gonna have decoration, they are gonna have music, they are gonna have like a bunch of things to enjoy the games. All right, I have a comment over here coming from IDBA. And this one is showing on Instagram, not on our typical feed. So if you are watching through YouTube, I don't think you're going to see IDBA, but I'm sure IDBA sees it. So I'm going to read IDBA's question. If one of the people in the marriage is retired, but the other still works, can they come on a retirement visa? That's a great question, IDBA. And listen, the answer is yes, no problem at all. The retirement visa is typically seen as something, as a high-end immigration route in Brazil, and therefore you would be very amenable to the Brazilian immigration to grant the spouse something we call family reunification visa. Okay, so the main one is going to get the retirement, typically residency. All right, IDBA, that's more like a terminology, a language. Visa when it's issued in the US, but you can also apply when you are physically in Brazil. So let's say you come to Brazil as a tourist, and once you are in Brazil, you could apply for the Brazil retirement residency, not visa. And then once you secure the residency, then your partner, your spouse, is going to piggyback on your application through the family reunification residency, meaning that your spouse may remain in Brazil for as long as you remain in Brazil. And that's typically the downside when you secure the family reunification, either visa or residency, that you're gonna need to rely on your spouse. And God forbid, if something happens to your spouse, guess what? Your residency or visa is gonna be voided because the main base for your immigration status is gonna be gone. Okay, but short answer, yes, IDBA. If you get the retirement visa, your spouse is most probably going to be able to rely on your application to stay in Brazil, and typically the rights of this person is going to mirror your rights. So let's say if you got in the US the retirement visa for 2 years, this person would also have 2 years to remain in Brazil. And after you renew your residency as a residency for prazo indeterminado, meaning like the permanent residency, guess what? This other person could also do the family reunification, and by piggybacking on your status to secure something equivalent as the permanent residency as well. All right, IDBA says thank you. You're welcome, IDBA. All right, now we have Matt. Apologies for initial post. Now it says the chat system blocked the link that I included in the message. I'm using a service for my FBI check, apostille, federal apostille, and notary processing. Good to know. Thank you for sharing, Matt. Yes, I could not see the link. And I just assumed like I had, I was skipping some message. So thank you for letting us know, Matt. And thank you for sharing. Sharing is always welcome over here. And Matt is sharing about this apostille provider. They handle an apostille in just 10 business days. That's a good deal. And Matt, would you mind sharing how much are they charging for the service? I'm just curious. All right, General Principal. Boa tarde, Senhor Oliveira. Boa tarde, General Principal. Good to see you over here. I read that Senator Bolsonaro has some allegations related to Banco Master. Do you think this is serious enough to change the front runners of the coming election? Interesting point, General Principal. And yes, and for those of you who don't know what we are talking over here, like Senator Bolsonaro is the son of former President Jair Bolsonaro, and his son, right, Flávio Bolsonaro, was chosen to compete against current President Lula in the upcoming presidential elections. And believe it or not, Senator Flávio Bolsonaro was actually, leading the polls, like, in a sense that he would beat President Lula in the second round. Like, in Brazilian elections, there are 2 rounds. There's a first round, and then the 2 best performers, they go to a second round. And in all simulations, Senator Flávio Bolsonaro was beating President, Lula. But then, there is, again, Banco Master, right? Like General Principal knows about Banco Master, and I'm sure many of you know about Banco Master. It was like a bank that went bankrupt, and on top of, the many issues that happened to this bank, there was a lot of involvement, from politicians, from the Supreme, justices, to everybody else in between with this bank, and particularly the bank owner. And then it was uncovered an audio in which Senator Flávio Bolsonaro was kind of asking the president of this failed bank for money. And it was money to develop, or to produce a movie about the life of former President Jair Bolsonaro, right? And it was a lot of money, right? And it was very interesting, if I'm not mistaken, right? I think it was an amount around 130 million reais. It could be 20 or 25 million US dollars. And because of this audio, because of this WhatsApp message that was leaked to the press, many people who would vote for Flávio Bolsonaro, now they are changing gears. So as of today, General Principal, as of today, guess what? For those simulations between President Lula and Senator Flávio Bolsonaro, President Lula now is ahead of Flávio Bolsonaro, right? So yes, it was a very substantial hit. Now we don't know, like he's trying to, minimize it, right? Like his strategy is to say, well, we should open like, an investigation on this whole thing. I don't care about the investigation, but guess what? President Lula's party is against the investigation. So as you can see, like this thing goes both ways. But the reality is, yes, it is impacting big time the Bolsonaro family strategy for the upcoming election. And there is some talk about, maybe, another candidate from the right side of the aisle taking over the place of Senator Flávio Bolsonaro. Who knows, right? Like, I mean, my guess, General Principal, is that if nothing else shows up, right? If nothing else comes, to hurt Flávio Bolsonaro, I think they would still keep him as the candidate. But yes, he was a very meaningful hit to his credibility, because he was always hitting, right? Like always hitting on President Lula, on on President Lula's party, because of the ties to Banco Master. And guess what? Like the Bolsonaro family also had some ties to some extent, right? All right, Matt is sharing. They charged me 157 US dollars. Pretty reasonable, Matt, particularly because, again, that sounds like an expedited service to me. So 157 US dollars is a pretty good deal. Thank you again for sharing. All right, we have IDBA. How do the different political parties feel about immigration? Yes, IDBA, I see what you're saying. And very interesting, we had elections, guess where? In Portugal, very recently, for president. And in Portugal, the population, they kind of align to the left side of the aisle. And for some reason, they are still pro-immigration, okay? And in Portugal, there are, for sure, and I'm being technical over here, right? It's not like a personal orientation, but they are facing severe challenges given the number of immigrants coming to Portugal, just like everywhere else in Europe. And they are still choosing to keep the immigration flowing, right? So that's typically a position of the left-wing parties. And in Brazil, IDBA, is more or less the same type of alignment. But in Brazil, like you don't feel the pain as much as people in Europe, right? Like, I mean, Brazil, if you compare with the entire European Union, like with, I don't know, like 20 countries, Brazil is almost like double the size of the entire European Union, right? So Brazil is so big in terms of geographical dimensions that, like the concern about immigration is not typically, concerning to, to the Brazilian population in general. Another very interesting dimension, IDBA, of your question, is that in Brazil, there is a different twist, right? Because President Lula and his party in general, they are kind of, I'm not sure if the right word is against the United States, but like I would say they are resistant to the push or to the dominance of the United States, right? So one of the things that President Lula did which goes against like this open border type of mindset. It was the requirement for U.S. citizens, Canadians, and Australians to get a visa to come to Brazil. And it was President Bolsonaro's a choice of providing a waiver that was then overturned by President Lula, right? So as you can see, sometimes in Brazil, immigration doesn't follow the same, the same framework you would see in the United States, in Europe. Okay, so there is no such clear difference between the two sides of the aisle, IDBA, and that's an interesting question for sure. Shark, there doesn't appear to be any slots available for July. Shark, are you talking about consultation? Because that's the last thing we spoke about. I would assume you're talking about slots, right? So we don't keep the schedule open, Shark, for two way into the future. Okay, so I think our schedules, they are available like for the next 3 to 4 weeks. Okay, so it doesn't mean that we're not gonna be available. It just means that our schedule hasn't got to July yet, but we typically have plenty of availability in July. Okay, and I'm taking a look here as we speak, and it looks like, our schedule or available appointments go as far as June the 11th. Okay, so after June the 11th, it doesn't mean that we are booked. It just means that our schedule is not open yet. And we do that for the sake of planning. Sometimes we need to attend like conferences. We are working on behalf of clients, like in some type of case, and we're basically not available, right? And it's difficult for us to commit to consultations like in July. But I'm sure you're gonna have plenty of availability by them, Shark. And by the way, our consultations, they are primarily done over Zoom, right? So you don't need to be in Rio de Janeiro when you arrive in July, I would assume, to participate in a consultation. You could have the consultation, like as early as of now, if you desire to do so. Okay. All right, it looks like it's working good, the new streaming platform so far. We have people from, Instagram, which we never had in the past. It was just like YouTube, and now we have people from Instagram. So it looks like it's working fine. I guess the quality, at least from my side, I don't see any issues. And yes, tell me if you think otherwise, but from what I see, the streaming has been working as expected. Let's see if we have anything else, or if we're gonna take something from our backlog over here. All right, backlog. All right, that's a somewhat repetitive question, but I'm gonna answer anyhow. If there is gonna be any changes in the amount, on the minimum amount required for people to apply for the real estate investor visa. And just recapping, as of today, the minimum amount is 1 million reais, and it's actually valid for the entire country, with like this caveat, like for the north and northeast, the government allows a reduction of 30%, and therefore people say, well, for the north and northeast is 700,000, right? But from the regulation, they say it's 1 million. But listen, if you cannot get to 1 million, we're gonna give you a break, and we're gonna accept the properties in the north and northeast areas for, 30% less of the required amount. And that's what is good today. There are no news of this amount changing in the next couple of months, but I always share that these amounts have been the same since 2018. Okay, so we are on track to complete like 10 years with the same amount. And guess what? If you do a quick calculation about inflation, you're gonna realize that this amount it should be almost double as of today. And that means it's a very good opportunity for those of you who are considering investment in real estate as a pathway to securing eventually permanent residence in Brazil. I would say is a pretty good deal as of today. In addition to that, the exchange rate is very favorable to foreign citizens, even though many people complain, well, the US dollar was buying almost 6 reais and now it's just buying 5. But listen, take a look at the historic evolution of the US dollar, and you're gonna see that a US dollar buying 5 reais is actually an exception, right? It's an exception, it's a pretty good deal. So currency exchange favorable to foreign citizens, and by the way, not just US citizens, but Europeans, Canadians, British, other people, plus the fact that the amount hasn't been updated as one would expect, mean that this is a pretty good deal for those of you interested in buying real estate in Brazil. Yeah, Shark just confirmed. Yeah, Shark. So, if you want to schedule for July, just, try to do it like probably, by the end of June. Or if you need a consultation sooner than later, you don't need to wait for July. But thank you for sharing. IDBA is asking, is it easy to purchase as a foreigner? I would like to purchase in the Northeast, specifically Salvador. IDBA is not that difficult. Everything in Brazil does require, patience with, red tape and bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is kind of ingrained in our culture. But, like we have many clients who bought properties, beautiful properties in Salvador, both for the purpose of just having a property there for vacations, meaning that they had no interest in immigration, and others as a stepstone for a more long-term journey in Brazil. But Salvador is a pretty good, pretty stable market, particularly like, the city of Salvador, right? Like when you start to go like to smaller cities, unless it is one of the smaller cities targeted by foreign citizens, then it may not be as active in terms of potential for selling a property. But Salvador City in general is a pretty good bet, right? I like Salvador a lot. A very strong presence of foreign citizens, and again, there are steps required. You're gonna need, documents. You're gonna need to legalize your documents. It could be like birth certificates, apostilled, marriage certificate. You may need, lots of documents. I would say you wouldn't expect to buy a property, but it's absolutely doable. All right, IDBA. So I wouldn't say it is difficult. I would just say, just like everything else in Brazil, there is a certain level of, red tape and bureaucracy that you're going to be facing. But that's part of the game. And once you, complete this journey, then you're going to be the proud owner of a piece of real estate in Brazil. So I would say, yes, there is some, friction there, but totally worth, all right? And yes, IDBA, you're very welcome. All right, James is asking, how long does it usually take to process this União Estável? 1 to 2 months in total. James, it's going to depend on what the cartório is going to ask you for. Nowadays, because união estável is almost the same thing as marriage in Brazil, unfortunately, you're going to face a similar level of red tape as of a marriage, meaning many cartórios, they are going to want to see evidence that you are free to marry, including, like sometimes they want to have a declaration notarized by the U.S. consulate in either São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro, in which you are self-declaring yourself as single. Other registries, they also going to enforce the fresh birth certificate requirement, because in Brazil, marriages, they are annotated on our birth certificate. So the cartório thinks, well, if Brazil does like that, the U.S. is going to do as well. But that's not the case. But no matter what, the cartório is still going to ask for a fresh apostilled birth certificate, right? So we spoke about just of the documents. Some cartórios, I don't understand why they are going to ask for the apostilled FBI background check, believe it or not. It's more like an exception, but we've seen that happening multiple times in the past. All right, James. So because of this friction, I would say most of the time is actually spent on gathering the documents you're going to need for the procedure. But the procedure, after everything is on the table, it could be done virtually in a single day, right? But again, James, just so we control here our, exposure to, what we are telling you or not. There are serious effects from união estável. I strongly recommend you to secure an attorney, and it could be an attorney, elsewhere. It doesn't need to be our service, right? But there are very serious patrimonial asset effects, obligations, right? I don't think you should be doing that by yourself. There are taxation effects. There are many things that go with this. Many times, people are going to strongly recommend you to get a prenuptial agreement. If you get a prenuptial, you're going to need an additional recording in the registry of real estate. Yeah, believe it or not, one thing has to do with the other. But that's how it is typically done. You record the prenuptial, then you need to record at the registry of real estate. So there is a bunch of steps, and by just having this conversation, I don't think you would be in a good position to tackle those procedures. And if you're gonna be in Ilhéus, maybe you could secure professional help in Ilhéus. But that's something I feel very strong about it. All right, I hope it makes sense. Okay, let me see what else we have. Andrea, nice to meet you, Andrea. We plan to move to Brazil at the end of the year. My husband and I have been married for 4 years. I have dual citizenship, U.S. and Brazil. Should my husband start the residency now in the U.S. or wait? Andrea, there are a bunch of factors, right? My recommendation would be for you to schedule a consultation to discuss. But I can tell you some of the factors that should be analyzed by you when reviewing your timeline for the residency. Okay, a major one is going to be taxation. So once your husband becomes a resident in Brazil through marriage, he's going to trigger tax residency on the spot, meaning that as soon as he gets the RNM card, he's a tax resident, and whatever income you and him are taking from the United States, you're going to need to pay taxes in Brazil, right? So just this topic alone, it would require a bunch of points being discussed between you, potentially a tax attorney. But, whenever people talk about timeline, that's the first thing that comes to mind. For instance, let's say if a foreign citizen is going to move to Brazil for good, one of the things they should be doing before becoming a tax resident in Brazil is to sell the property, because if you sell a property in the United States after securing like permanent residency in Brazil, guess what? Whatever capital gains you have in the US, you need to pay to the Brazilian government, right? And of course, there are some credits that you may get from paying taxes in the US, but typically, the credits that you're going to get, they are limited to some circumstances. For instance, federal tax paid in the US, you can typically get as a credit to kind of offset a similar tax obligation in Brazil, but you cannot do the same thing with state taxes, and you cannot do the same thing with municipal taxes, right? So taxation is a super serious subject, Andrea, and this is going to be relevant for your timeline, okay? And guess what? If you move into Brazil anyhow, this is going to be part of your journey. Now, something that is always amusing to me is like when people come and say, well, you know what, like we don't want to live in Brazil, but I still want to get the permanent residency for my spouse. It could be like a wife, a husband, right? It could be a civil union type of thing. And that's a horrible idea, because by doing so, you are triggering tax residency in Brazil without any need. And that's super common. I would say we have at least a consultation a week for someone who would be doing that just for convenience, and that's not a good idea. So, you know, from a very high level, Andrea, and again, this is not advisory, right? That's more like what we see in our practice. Like typically, people would want to postpone the residency as much as possible until they cannot longer do it, and ideally after they have been through a high taxable events such as selling real estate in Brazil. All right, so I want to say thank you to all of you for the interesting, participations, questions shared, comments, resources. And now our next live stream is going to be next week. Is going to be 7 days from now. Is going to be already the month of June. Is going to be on June the 3rd, right? June the 3rd. Yes, June the 3rd is our next Wednesday. And we're going to be happy to see you again. And you can join us now. You could join us, through YouTube as usual. You could join us through Instagram, and I think Facebook as well. And that's it for today. Wishing you all a blessed rest of